Hi everyone, Mike Brown here again. Welcome back to Educator.com's Adobe Photoshop Elements Beginning and Intermediate course. In the previous lesson, we talked about image sizing, resizing, canvas sizing, document sizes, preparing your image in size for output to various different, perhaps print, perhaps web, perhaps just back into your computer's hard drive. But what format are you going to save the files in when you output them? In this lesson, we're going to look at the Adobe Photoshop Elements File Formats Explained, the various formats available for opening, saving, and which ones that you should use. So let's get started. Here is a list of the primary formats, file formats, that you will be using or might be using in Photoshop Elements. The first and foremost that you're going to use, whether you open a RAW file, whether you open a JPEG, whether you save one out as a Photoshop file or reopen it as a Photoshop file, for example, right here, this is a .psd, 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 and one .jpg. All the .psds are Photoshop format. And this format is absolutely lossless, it loses no details whatsoever. It supports all layers and channels, effects, everything that you do. When you save it and reopen it, you get it 100% the way you saved it. It saves a fairly large file, but that's your working file format. Let's go ahead and put up a layer and do a little discussion. That's the working format for Photoshop Elements. Photoshop PSD. Primarily, you'll do that. Now, remember we talked about JPEG way back, and the difference between a JPEG and a RAW file. JPEG is a lossy compression format, and when you save it, it compresses and loses data. When you open it back up, it has to fill in the gaps, and it kind of degrades a little bit. And then when you save it again, it throws away a little data, and after 2 or 3 times of opening a JPEG and saving it back as a JPEG, you will notice some degradation. But JPEG is the most common image format for cameras and for the web and computer image displays. It does not support layers or transparency. In other words, if you've created a JPEG, let's say you designed a logo for a website, and it's against a transparent background. When you save it as a JPEG, it turns that transparent background into white. However, for images, JPEG is the best file format for the web, and also, for sending around and for visually looking on, it's the best. So it's the most common format. A lot of times you'll open a file that was a JPEG out of the camera, work on it, save it as a Photoshop file, and at the same time, knock it down in size and save it back out as a JPEG for web usage. Or for, if you have a client at a graphics design house or an advertising agency, you might send them the JPEG just as a rough so they can see what it looks like. Easily transferable. That's what JPEGs are, the most commonly used one. But remember, they're lossy compression.